I have to be honest, looking at the stack of research you've brought in today, I'm feeling a little, well, a little misled.
Misled. How so? What were you expecting?
Well, when I signed up for a deep dive on Buddhism, I had a very specific vibe in mind. I was picturing, a serene garden, maybe a smiling statue somewhere, the smell of sandalwood incense,
Right.
just a general sense of just relax, everything is chill. But reading through the source material, this doesn't look like relaxation. This looks like a schematics manual for a jet engine.
That is probably the most accurate description you could possibly give. I mean,
hmm
the chill vibe, that's the export version.
The greeting card version.
Exactly. It's the version that fits nicely on a scented candle.
Yep.
But if we actually look at the source code, the original texts, the history, the rigorous manuals,
Huh.
Buddhism isn't about relaxation. It's about rebellion. And it's about engineering.
Engine?
Cognitive engineering. Yeah.
Yeah.
Think of it less as a religion in the Western sense, worshiping a creator god and following dogma, and more like a rigorous 2,500-year-old attempt to hack the human operating system.
Okay, that's the hook right there. That's what we're doing today. We are going to strip away the fluff. No statues, no incense, no cultural baggage, and look at the actual mechanics.
The nuts and bolts.
You're talking about the history of a radical counterculture movement, the real politic of how it survived, the really dangerous esoteric practices that involve things you would never associate with monks, and the specific mental technologies designed to solve one massive universal problem.
The problem of dukkha.
Right. Let's start there. Because usually when people translate dukkha, they just say suffering, which I have to say sounds incredibly dramatic. Life is suffering. It sounds a bit emo, doesn't it? But our notes suggest that's not quite right.
It's not so much a mistranslation as it is a major oversimplification. Suffering makes you think of, breaking your leg or the grief of losing someone, big acute pain.
Yeah, capital S suffering.
But dukkha is much subtler. It refers to a fundamental unsatisfactoriness. The best analogy I've heard is a wheel that's just slightly off-center.
Okay.
Every time it turns, there's a bump, a squeak, a little vibration. Even when things are going great, you got the promotion, the food is delicious, the weather is perfect, there is this low-level background hum of anxiety.
That feeling that it's not going to last.
Exactly that.
Right.
The knowledge that it won't last, or that it's not quite enough, that little squeaky wheel,
Yeah.
that feeling of, okay, this is great, but what's next? What do I have to worry about now?
I know that feeling. I think everyone knows that feeling.
That is dukkha. And the mission of this entire deep dive is to explore the system that was built from the ground up to reverse engineer that feeling, to find the source code of that dissatisfaction and, well, to delete it.
So just to be super clear, we aren't talking about coping strategies. This isn't about thinking positive or just, dealing with it.
No, not at all. We were talking about deconstructing the very perception of reality that creates the dissatisfaction in the first place. It's not about putting a bandage on the problem. It's about performing surgery on the root cause.
Okay. To understand how this system was built, we have to go back to the lab where it all started. And the lab in this case is Iron Age India, roughly the 5th century BCE. And I think we need to set the scene here, because this wasn't some peaceful, contemplative time.
Not in the slightest. It was a period of massive upheaval. You have to imagine the Gangetic Plain. For the first time, cities are exploding in size. You've got surplus agriculture, new trade routes opening up, new money flooding in.
Urbanization.
And whenever you have rapid urbanization, you have an intellectual crisis. The old ways, the old stories the village elders told you, they just stop making sense in this new, complex world.
And the old ways here, that refers to Vedic Brahmanism.
Right. This was the established order, the spiritual monopoly. It was a very rigid, ritualistic system. Society was stratified by caste, by birth. You had the Brahmins, the priests, at the very top.
And they held all the cards.
They held the keys to the universe, or so they claimed. They performed these incredibly elaborate, incredibly expensive fire sacrifices to keep the cosmos running. And more importantly, they held the monopoly on salvation.
So it was a completely closed shop. If you weren't born a Brahmin, you couldn't access the divine. You were just sort of out of luck.
Essentially, yes, it was pay to play, and your birth determined your payment plan. If you wanted a good rebirth, you paid the Brahmin to do the ritual. But then you get this explosion of thinkers who look at this whole system and just say, this is nonsense.
This is where the Shramanas come in,
Yeah.
the wanderers.
Yes, and these guys, They were the counterculture. They were spiritual anarchists.
Yeah.
Imagine walking into a village in 500 BCE. You'd see these characters, wild, matted hair, maybe naked, some covered in ash, just standing in the town square debating the nature of reality.
I love the description of them in the research. They sound like the ancient equivalent of punks or radical minimalists or something.
That's a great way to put it. They rejected the caste system entirely. They walked out on their families, which in a clan-based society was basically social suicide.
Yeah.
They gave up their homes, their jobs, and they went into the forests to experiment on themselves.
And it wasn't just one group, was it? It was like a marketplace of ideas.
It was probably the most competitive spiritual marketplace in human history. It was a free-for-all. You had the materialists, the Charvakas. They were the original atheists. They said, look, there is no soul. There's no afterlife. When you die, you rot. The Brahmins are scamming you for their fee. Just eat, drink, and be merry.
The nihilists.
Hedonistic nihilists, yeah. Then you had the other extreme, the determinists, the Ajivikas. Their view was that everything was pre-written fate. Niyati, you have zero free will.
So if you're suffering, it's just your script. Tough luck.
Exactly. You're just an actor reading your lines. Don't bother trying to change anything, because you can't.
Yeah.
And then you had the Jains.
The Jains were the really hardcore ones.
Extremely hardcore. They had this idea that any action, any karma, was like a physical substance that weighed down the soul and trapped it in the cycle of rebirth. So the solution was to stop acting.
How do you even do that?
Through extreme asceticism, starving themselves, sometimes to death, standing in one position for days on end. Some would even pull out their own hair, strand by strand, to avoid the violence of cutting it. They were trying to literally burn off their karma through sheer pain and inaction.
Okay, so that's the landscape. You have the hedonists saying nothing matters, the determinists saying you can't change anything, and the Jains saying torture yourself to freedom. And right into this chaotic mix walks a young man named Siddhartha Gautama.
And this is where we have to start peeling back the layers of legend.
Right. The prince in the palace.
Yeah, the story we all know is the fairy tale version. The king tries to hide all suffering from his son, the prince, so he lives in this kind of Truman Show-style bubble of constant pleasure until he's 29 years old.
Which, come on, he was 29. He probably knew old people existed. It doesn't really hold up to scrutiny.
Exactly. Historically, it's very unlikely he was a prince of some vast empire. The Shakya clan, his people, were likely a small oligarchy in the foothills of the Himalayas, what's now modern-day Nepal. He was an aristocrat, for sure. He had wealth. He had what we would call a good life. But the story of the Forsytes, seeing an old man, a sick man, a corpse, and a renunciant monk, is almost certainly an allegory.
So it's not a literal story, it's a representation of a psychological break.
It's the midlife crisis, to end all midlife crises. Imagine you have everything society tells you that you should want. You have the money, the power, the beautiful family, all the sensory pleasures you could ask for. And then one day, the realization hits you like a truck. This is a failing coping mechanism.
Because entropy exists, because things fall apart.
Precisely. You can eat the most delicious meal, but you'll get hungry again. You can have the perfect strong body, but it will age and get sick. You can love your family with all your heart, but they will die. He realized that building your happiness on sensory gratification is like building a house on a frozen lake that is starting to crack.
That is a terrifying realization. I think most of us spend our entire lives actively trying not to look at that crack in the ice.
We distract ourselves, we scroll, we consume, we stay busy. Siddhartha couldn't distract himself anymore. The crack was too obvious, so he pulls the great departure.
And again, we romanticize this moment. We see these beautiful paintings of him riding off into the moonlight on his favorite horse. But in the context of his time, this was a massive scandal, wasn't it?
It was a disaster for his family. He had a newborn son, he had a wife, he had a duty, a dharma to his clan to become a leader and a warrior, and he walked out on all of it. He abandoned his child in the middle of the night. In the eyes of his society, he was a deadbeat dad and a traitor.
But he felt he had no choice.
He felt that the house was on fire, and he had to find a way out, not just for himself, but for everyone still inside. He was that desperate.
So he joins the Wanderers, he goes into the forest, and he basically treats his own mind like a laboratory.
For 6 years, he just runs the protocols of the time. First, he goes to the most famous meditation teachers. He learns these advanced techniques of formless meditation. He achieves states of concentration so deep that the entire world disappears into a kind of peaceful void.
Was always a but.
But when he stood up, when he came out of the trance, the problem was still there. The squeaky wheel was still squeaking. It's like taking a really strong tranquilizer. It pauses the suffering, but it doesn't cure the underlying disease.
So temporary peace isn't the solution. So he tries the other extreme, the Jain approach. Pain.
He declares all-out war on his body. He fasts until he's so thin he can feel his spine through his stomach. He holds his breath until he hallucinates and feels like his head is going to explode. He lies on beds of thorns. He's trying to crush his mind into submission with his will.
And the data comes back negative.
It's a total failure. It just made him weak, angry, and his mind became dull and useless. Pain is not liberation. So now he's completely stuck. The indulgence of the palace failed him. The torture of the forest failed him.
This is the critical moment then.
Right.
The middle way.
Exactly. He's on the verge of death. And he remembers a moment from his childhood, just sitting under a rose apple tree watching his father work. And in that memory, he recalled feeling a natural, unforced sense of peace and clarity. It wasn't a high, it wasn't painful, it was just balanced.
And that sparks the insight.
The insight is, maybe the problem isn't the body. Maybe pleasure isn't the enemy and pain isn't the solution. Maybe the problem is the mind's fundamental understanding of reality.
So he eats some rice pudding offered by a village girl, breaking his fast and horrifying his ascetic companions, sits under the Bodhi tree and basically says, I am not moving from this spot until I crack the code.
And he sits. And he just watches his own mind. He reverse engineers the machine. And this leads to the core discovery. This is the EMC2 of Buddhism. It's called dependent origination.
Okay, this is a heavy concept. Walk us through it simply.
He realized that suffering isn't a punishment from the gods, and it's not random bad luck. It is a process. It's an algorithm with a clear sequence. It starts with ignorance avidya.
And ignorance here doesn't mean stupidity, right?
Not at all. It means a fundamental misunderstanding of how reality works. Specifically, misunderstanding three things: that things are impermanent, that they are unsatisfactory, and that they lack a solid independent self.
Okay, so we're ignorant of those facts. What happens next in the chain?
Because we think things are permanent and will make us happy, we crave them. We develop a thirst. Because we crave them, we cling to them, we grasp. And because we cling to things that are, by their very nature, changing and impermanent, we suffer. Ignorance leads to craving, which leads to clinging, which leads to suffering.
It's a causal chain reaction.
A perfect chain. And the brilliance of this discovery was this: if it's a chain, you can break it. If you can remove the very first link, if you can destroy the ignorance by truly seeing reality as it is, then the craving has no ground to stand on. The clinging stops. The suffering collapses.
That was the awakening. He didn't become a god or a deity. He became the Buddha, which just means the one who woke up.
He woke up from the dream that the ego tells all of us every single day.
So he cracks the code. He spends the next 45 years of his life teaching this system. But he never wrote anything down, did he?
Not a single word. It was a purely oral tradition for hundreds of years. And naturally, as it spread across different cultures and different minds, people started interpreting the source code in different ways. This gives us what are known as the three turnings of the wheel of Dharma.
I really want to dig into these schools because I think most people in the West assume Buddhism is all the same. But the difference between a Theravada monk in Sri Lanka and a tantric practitioner in Tibet is, well, it's massive.
It's like the difference between a bicycle and a spaceship. They're both vehicles designed to get you somewhere, but the mechanics, the fuel, and the risks are totally different.
Okay, let's start with the first turning, the Theravada, the school of elders.
This is the oldest surviving school. Their whole focus is on conservation. They want to preserve what they believe are the original teachings of the historical Buddha as accurately as possible. Their core texts are the Pali Canon.
And their goal is individual liberation, right? You're trying to become an arhat.
Yes, an arhat is someone who has graduated, as you put it earlier, someone who has destroyed the causes of future rebirth. They have extinguished the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. They are done. They've exited the system of samsara.
And the main philosophical tool they use to do this is the concept of anatta, or no self. I need you to pause here because this is the hardest pill for most of us to swallow. I feel like me. I have my memories, I have my preferences, my personality. How can you possibly say there is no self?
The Buddha would say, look closer. Investigate that feeling of me. What are you? Are you your body? Well, the cells in your body are constantly changing. The body you have now is not the body you had 7 years ago.
Okay, fair enough.
Are you your thoughts? Well, thoughts come and go without your permission. You don't decide your next thought. Are you your emotions? Emotions flare up and vanish in minutes. If you are your anger, what happens when you're not angry? Do you cease to exist?
So I'm not any one of the parts. I'm the combination, the
Yes.
whole system.
You are the process. Think of a waterfall. From a distance, it looks like a solid, stable object. You can point to it and say, that's a waterfall.
Mm.
But if you get up close, what is it really? It's water rushing past a certain point. It's never the same water for 2 consecutive seconds. There is no fixed waterfall entity. There is just the dynamic process of flowing.
So self is a verb, not a noun.
That's a perfect way to put it. And the early Theravada monks got absolutely obsessed with mapping this flow. This obsession led to the creation of the Abhidharma. This was the higher teachings. Imagine the periodic table of elements, but for the mind.
They categorized every single type of thought and mental state.
Every single one. They broke reality down into its ultimate constituent parts, which they called dharmas with a lowercase r n. These are the ultimate building blocks of any experience. A moment of anger isn't just anger. It's a compound of sensation, perception, volition, consciousness, and dozens of other factors, all arising and ceasing in a fraction of a second.
That is incredibly analytical, almost clinical. They wanted to see the matrix code so clearly that they wouldn't get tricked by the display anymore.
Exactly. But you use the word clinical, and I think that leads right into the critique. Around the turn of the millennium, maybe 500 years after the Buddha, a new movement emerges. They looked at the elders and said, okay, becoming an arhat and escaping the cycle is cool, but isn't it kind of selfish? You're escaping the burning building and leaving everyone else inside to burn.
This is the second turning then, the Mahayana, the great vehicle.
Right, and they, not so subtly, called the old school Hinayana, or the lesser vehicle, which was a pretty sick burn in ancient Sanskrit circles, I imagine. The Mahayana completely shifted the goalpost. The ideal wasn't the solitary arhat anymore, it was the bodhisattva.
The one who stays behind.
The one who stands at the gates of nirvana, fully capable of entering, but vows to delay their own final escape until every single being, down to the last blade of grass, is saved. It's a radical shift from, I am saving myself, to, there is no myself separate from you, so my liberation is tied to yours. We must save us.
And this huge shift in motivation brought with it a new philosophical weapon, shunyata, emptiness. Now, empty sounds really depressing to the Western ear. It sounds like nihilism. Life is empty and meaningless.
It's a huge misunderstanding.
Anthony.
Emptiness doesn't mean nothing exists. That would be nihilism. It means nothing exists intrinsically or independently from its own side.
Give me an analogy that isn't a chair. The notes use a chair, which is fine, but I want something better.
Okay. Think of a video game. Look at a character on the screen. Let's say Mario. Does Mario exist? You can see him, you can control him, he can interact with the world. But if you look for the character of Mario inside the computer's hardware, you won't find him.
No, you'll find code, pixels, electricity.
Exactly. You'll find lines of code, you'll find illuminated pixels on a screen, you'll find electricity running through circuits. Mario is empty of any independent, inherent existence. He only exists as a temporary manifestation because of the code, the screen, and the electricity all coming together.
Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form.
Precisely. The form of Mario is the emptiness of any inherent Mario-ness. You can't separate them. And this philosophy just exploded into these incredible schools, like Madhyamaka, which was founded by a genius named Nagarjuna. His whole project was to use logic to destroy logic itself.
This is the tetralemma. This thing breaks my brain every time I read it.
It's designed to. He would take any concept, any statement about reality, and analyze it with a 4-pronged logic. He'd ask, 1, does it exist? 2, does it not exist? 3, does it both exist and not exist? 4, does it neither exist nor not exist? And through rigorous logic, he would prove that none of those statements can possibly be true.
My brain hurts just hearing you list them.
That's the feature, not the bug. He wanted to crash your conceptual mind. Because if you can't rely on logic, if you can't rely on language to grasp reality, you're forced into a direct, intuitive, non-conceptual experience of how things actually are.
Okay, so we have the analytical elders, the compassionate deconstructors, and then things get really, really wild. The third turning, the Vajrayana, the diamond vehicle.
This is Tantra. It developed in medieval India, and it's often called the dangerous path or the swift path. The logic was brutally simple. If everything is empty, if everything is mind-made, why are we rejecting the body? Why are we rejecting passion and desire?
The other school said desire was the poison. Tantra says desire is the fuel.
Exactly. Think of desire as nuclear energy. You can let it blow you up, which is what happens in ordinary suffering. Or you can build a reactor and use its immense power to power the entire grid of your enlightenment. They wanted to transmute the raw energy of passion into wisdom.
And this is where the no fluff warning on this deep dive really kicks in. Because the practices described in these tantric texts involve things you just do not associate with holy men.
Taboo breaking was absolutely central to the practice. You have these radical practitioners, they were called siddhas, who lived in cremation grounds, meditating on corpses to understand impermanence. They would feast on meat and drink alcohol, which were strictly forbidden for other monks, and they would practice sexual yoga, or karma mudra.
But this wasn't just free love or hedonism, was it? That's the key distinction.
No, and that's the danger and why it was so secret. It wasn't about indulgence. It was about using these powerful experiences to generate high-voltage states of consciousness. Bliss, shock, fear, and then in that peak moment of intensity, turning the mind to look directly at emptiness. It's like skydiving to cure your fear of falling. It's incredibly risky.
So the secrecy was a safety mechanism.
It had to be. If you don't have the right foundation and the right teacher, you will absolutely misunderstand it. You'll think, oh, the great masters are drinking, so I can just get drunk. You will burn yourself, spiritually speaking.
So Buddhism is evolving, it's getting more complex, and it's moving. It hits the Silk Road, and when it lands in China, it hits a massive cultural wall.
The Great Wall of Confucianism. You have to understand, traditional Chinese society was built on filial piety. Your duty was to your ancestors, your family lineage, and the emperor. And here come these Indian monks who shave their heads, which was seen as disrespecting the body their parents gave them, who beg for food instead of working, and who are celibate so they don't have children to carry on the family name.
They looked like societal parasites.
From a strict Confucian viewpoint, they look like unfilial monsters. So Buddhism had to adapt to survive. It started borrowing language from Taoism, which was a native Chinese philosophy. Nirvana became wu-wei, effortless non-action, and this fusion of Indian Mahayana emptiness and Chinese Taoist naturalism created Chan.
Which we know in the West as Zen.
Yes, and Zen feels like the ultimate minimalist version of Buddhism. It stripped everything back to the absolute essentials. You had Zen masters who said, burn the scriptures. The truth isn't in a book. It's a direct transmission from mind to mind outside of words.
And there's this great irony that this supposedly peaceful religion became the favorite philosophy of the samurai warrior class in Japan. That seems like a massive contradiction.
It's the ultimate contradiction, but it makes perfect psychological sense. Why would a killer need Zen? Because Zen solves the warrior's ultimate problem, hesitation.
In a sword fight, if you stop to think, you die.
Exactly. If you stand there thinking, should I strike now? What if I miss? I don't want to die. You've already lost. Zen trained the mind to be in a state of no mind, or mushin, a state of pure, instantaneous action, where the sword seems to move by itself without the clumsy intervention of the thinking ego. It was the perfect psychology for combat.
That is a fascinating, if dark, application of the tech. It really shows that this technology of the mind is neutral. It can be used for liberation, or it can be used for more efficient killing.
Just like nuclear physics can power a city or destroy it.
Speaking of power, we have to talk about Tibet. Because the Shangri-La myth is so strong in the West, we picture these wise old men meditating peacefully on mountains.
We do. But the history of Buddhism in Tibet is a history of realpolitik. It was introduced there by kings who wanted a sophisticated philosophical and legal system to unify the country and, crucially, to check the power of the unruly noble clans and the indigenous shamanic religion, Gun. It was a political tool from the very beginning.
And it eventually became a theocracy. The Dalai Lamas weren't just spiritual leaders, they were the kings.
Yes, for centuries, Tibet was a feudal society. The great monasteries owned vast estates and had serfs who worked the land. It was not a modern democracy. However, and this is what makes it unique, it was a society where the gross national product was enlightenment. The best and brightest minds didn't go into finance or tech, they went into the monastery to become full-time psychonauts.
And while it was flourishing in the fortress of Tibet and adapting in Japan, it died out in India. That's the tragic part of this whole story.
It vanished completely. Internal decay played a part. The sources say the monks in the great universities like Nalanda got too rich, too comfortable, too isolated in their intellectual debates. They lost touch with the common people. The surrounding Hindu culture also absorbed it, turning the Buddha into just another avatar of the god Vishnu. But the final blow was the series of Islamic invasions from the West.
The burning of Nalanda University.
In 1193 CE, you have to understand, Nalanda was the Ivy League of the ancient world, but bigger. It had a 9-story library with literally millions of manuscripts. When the invaders sacked the university, they set the library on fire. The legends say it burned for 3 months.
3 months of smoke, that's a powerful image.
It wiped out the institutional memory of Buddhism in India. The monks were killed or they fled to Nepal and Tibet. And just like that, the religion of the Buddha was gone from the land of its birth.
But the software survived. It was backed up in Tibet, in China, in Sri Lanka, in Southeast Asia. So we've done the history, the evolution, the politics. Now I want to open the manual. I want to look at what they were actually doing in those monasteries. Let's go to section 4, the mechanics of meditation.
Let's do it.
And again, we need to be crystal clear. This isn't close your eyes and think happy thoughts. This is high-level engineering.
It is attentional engineering.
Yeah.
And the core protocol, especially in the early tradition, is something called the jhanas. These are states of deep meditative absorption.
What does that feel like? Can you walk me through the stages as described in the texts?
Okay, so step 1 is achieving access concentration. You focus relentlessly on a single object, usually the sensation of the breath at the tip of the nose. You just keep bringing your attention back over and over until the noise of the ordinary mind finally drops away. The 5 hindrances, lust, anger, sleepiness, restlessness, and doubt, they all go quiet.
And then what happens?
Then a feedback loop starts. When the brain isn't wasting energy on worrying and planning, it releases a kind of blissful energy. You might see a light in your mind, an amida. If you can lock your attention onto that sign, you fall into the first jhanan.
The notes mention rapture or pititi. That sounds intense.
It is unbelievably intense. It's a powerful physical bliss. People describe it as waves of pleasure, like an electrical current running through the spine. The texts are clear. It is better than sex. It is better than any drug.
And that's a trap, isn't it?
It is a massive trap. You can become a jhana junkie. You get addicted to the high, and you just want to sit there and buzz all day. But the instruction is to see that even this incredible bliss is impermanent and to move on.
You have to refine the signal, get more subtle.
Exactly. You let go of the coarse physical rapture to enter the second jhana, which is more of a deep mental joy. Then you let that go to enter the third jhana, which is a state of peaceful contentment. Finally, you let go of contentment itself to enter the fourth jhana. And this is a state of profound, unshakable equanimity, or upekkha. The breath becomes so shallow it seems to stop. The boundaries of the body dissolve. You are just a single point of pure, peaceful awareness in a void.
That sounds incredibly peaceful, but that's still not the end goal, is it? That's just the platform.
Correct. All of that is samatha meditation, which means calm or stability. You build this incredibly stable, powerful platform so that you can then do the real work of vipassana, which is insight. And this, according to the maps, is where the journey can turn into a horror movie for a little while.
The dark night of the soul.
In the Theravada tradition, they have this very detailed map called the Progress of Insight. And it shows that after the initial highs of seeing reality as this stream of vibrations rising and passing away, you inevitably hit a series of stages called the dukkha nanas, the knowledges of suffering.
What does that actually feel like for the person going through it?
It sounds like pure terror, disgust, paranoia. The meditator looks at their own hand, and instead of seeing a solid hand, they perceive it as a disgusting, rotting, biological process about to fall apart. They look at the world, and it feels like a flimsy, dissolving dream. The texts describe a visceral nausea toward all of existence.
Why on earth would anyone voluntarily do this? The sales pitch is terrible. Come meditate with us. You'll feel like you're going insane, and reality is a nightmare.
Because it's the only way out, a teacher would say. You were always living in a burning building. You just trained yourself to ignore the smell of the smoke. Now, for the first time, you actually smell the smoke. Yes, it's terrifying, but acknowledging the fire is the first and most necessary step to escaping it. You are finally seeing the first noble truth, the truth of dukkha directly, not just as a concept.
So you don't stop. You don't run away. You push through the terror.
You learn to just watch it. You realize that the terror is also just a sensation. It's also impermanent. You observe the fear. You observe the disgust. And eventually, if you persist, you break through to a stage called sankhara upekkha equanimity regarding formations.
You become the screen, not the movie.
That's the classic analogy. You stop fighting the dissolution. You stop trying to hold on. You just let it all flow. And then, magafala, path and fruit.
The system crash. The big one.
Cessation. Nirodha. For a moment, consciousness just stops. The mind blinks out. There is no experience of space, no time, nothing. It might last for a fraction of a second, it might last for a minute, but when the system reboots, you are permanently changed.
Because you've seen the off switch.
You've seen that the self can literally turn off and the universe doesn't explode.
Yeah.
Once you've seen that, the illusion of the ego is permanently fractured. According to the system, you are now a stream enterer. You've entered the stream that leads inevitably to full enlightenment.
That is just so heavy. It's so technical. It's not about finding a little peace. It's a complete restructuring of your relationship with reality.
It's cognitive surgery, with all the risks that implies.
Let's pivot to the other side of the spectrum, the Vajrayana and Zen advanced engineering. Because if Theravada is a kind of careful, methodical surgery, Vajrayana is more like radical biohacking.
It uses a different model. It works with what they call the subtle body. Now, from a modern scientific perspective, we can debate what this is. But from an experiential first-person perspective, they map out a whole network of subtle energy channels, nadi and winds, or energies, prana, that flow through the body.
And the idea is that in our normal neurotic state, our energy is scattered.
It's raging through all the side channels, fueling our anxious thoughts, our desires, our anger. The goal of these tantric practices is to gather all those scattered winds and force them to the central channel, which runs up the spine. The texts say that when the winds enter the central channel, dualistic thought completely stops. You access the clear light mind, the most fundamental level of consciousness.
And they use deity yoga to do this. This sounds like the ultimate fake it till you make it strategy.
It's method acting on a metaphysical level.
Yeah.
You are assigned a specific deity, a Buddha, by your teacher, let's say Tara, the embodiment of compassion. You then spend hours a day visualizing yourself as Tara. You visualize your skin is made of blue light. You visualize you have her perfect compassion, her perfect wisdom. You recite her mantra.
You are essentially hijacking the brain's identity creation mechanism.
Precisely. We know about neuroplasticity and mirror neurons. We know the brain has a hard time distinguishing between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. If you spend 4 hours a day, every day for 10 years, vividly hallucinating that you are an enlightened being of pure light and compassion, eventually the brain starts to rewire itself. The old neurotic Steve identity gets overwritten by the enlightened Tara identity.
And then there's the Zen tech, the koan. What is the sound of one hand clapping?
Most people in the West think this is a clever riddle. They think, oh, is the answer silence? No, it's not a riddle. It's a virus.
A cognitive virus.
A virus you voluntarily install in your logic center. The teacher gives you the koan. You go away and you try to solve it with your intellect. You fail. You come back. You present your answer. The teacher yells at you that you're wrong. The pressure builds and builds. You can't eat. You can't sleep. You are consumed by what they call great doubt.
So you're intentionally inducing a nervous breakdown.
A controlled cognitive breakdown of the rational ego. You push the logical mind to its absolute limit until it snaps. And in that snap, when logic completely fails, intuition is forced to break through. You don't figure out the answer. You become the answer in a flash of insight.
And then there's the other Zen practice, shikantaza, just sitting. That sounds easier, but the notes say it's the hardest.
It is by far the hardest practice. There's
Right.
no visualization, no breath counting, no coin to focus on. It is just sitting in a state of ruthless alertness.
The classic description is like sitting on the edge of a sword.
Exactly. If you get lost in a daydream, you fall off one side and you're cut. If you get tense and start trying to get enlightened, you fall off the other side and you're cut. You have to balance perfectly with total presence in the present moment. It is excruciatingly difficult because the mind has absolutely nowhere to hide.
Okay, we've been way up in the stratosphere with all this high-level tech, but I'm thinking about the listener who is stuck in traffic right now, or the one who is dreading a difficult meeting with their boss. How does any of this spiritual science apply to the daily grind?
This is where the rubber really meets the road. The Buddha was, above all else, a pragmatist. He gave us a fantastic diagnostic tool called the 5 hindrances.
Okay, let's run the diagnostic.
He said that if your mind is unhappy, distracted, or ineffective, it's almost always because of one of these 5 bugs running in your mental software.
Okay, bug number 1, sensory desire.
I want the donut. I want to check Instagram for the 10th time. I want to buy the shiny thing. The traditional antidote isn't just raw willpower. It's what you could call consequence analysis.
Play the tape forward.
Right. Before you grab the donut, visualize eating it. It tastes good for about 30 seconds. Then what? A sugar crash an hour later, feeling guilty. A stomach ache. You break the glamour of the object. You see the hook that's hidden inside the bait.
Bug number 2, ill will, anger.
You're sitting in traffic, stewing about that comment your coworker made this morning. The antidote is meta-loving kindness or friendliness. But here's the hack. You don't do it for them. You do it for you.
Because holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Exactly. Or holding a hot coal. Anger floods your own body with cortisol. It destroys your focus and your peace. You generate a feeling of friendliness to forgive them, not because they deserve it, but because you refuse to keep burning your own hand.
Bug number 3, sloth and torpor.
Huh.
Laziness, that classic afternoon slump.
The hack here is not to psychologicalize it. Don't beat yourself up for being lazy. It's usually a physical state. The antidote is energy. Visualize a bright light in your head. Stand up and stretch. Splash cold water on your face. Treat it like a physiological state, not a moral failing.
Bug number 4, restlessness and worry, anxiety, the spinning hamster wheel of the mind.
The antidote is grounding. Get out of the story in your head and get into the sensations in your body. Feel the weight of your butt in the chair. Feel the texture of your steering wheel. Feel your feet on the floor. Anxiety almost always lives in the future. The body can only live in the present. If you can feel the body, you stop the time travel.
And finally, bug number 5, doubt. Is this working? Am I doing it right? This is all stupid.
Doubt is the most dangerous one because it stops you from trying anything. The antidote is inquiry. First, you identify it.
Yeah.
This is a thought of doubt. You see it as just a sentence in your head. It's not a divine truth. Or you look at the data, you study, you read the books, you realize that millions of people have used this technology before you and have gotten results.
I also love the Abhidharma hack for emotions. We touched on emotional granularity before.
This is a complete game changer for modern mental health. Usually we experience an emotion and we say, I am angry. We make the emotion into a solid block and we identify with it completely. I angry.
But the Abhidharma approach deconstructs it. It breaks it down.
It says, no, stop. What is actually happening in your direct experience? 1, contact. You heard a sound. 2, perception. Your mind interpreted that sound as an insult. 3, feeling. You feel a physical sensation of heat in your chest and tightness in your jaw. 4, volition. You have a mental urge to yell or hit something.
So you break the emotion apart into its components.
And you focus on the part you can manage. The feeling. Okay, there's heat in the chest. That's just a physical sensation. That's just physics. That's manageable. You intentionally ignore the perception, the story about being insulted. If you take away the story, the heat is just heat. It creates a critical gap where you can choose how to respond rather than just reacting blindly.
That is the hacking right there. You are intervening in the source code of the emotion before it executes the Yell at Boss program.
That's it, exactly.
One more practical tool from the notes, sense restraint. This sounds kind of austere and restrictive.
Think of it less as restriction and more as dopamine management. In the Buddha's time, it meant not staring at attractive people in the village market. Today, it means looking at that red notification dot on your phone and consciously choosing not to click it.
Inserting a pause between impulse and action.
Do I really need to see this right now? Every time you don't click, you build a renunciation muscle. You are proving to your own brain that you are in charge, not the algorithm designed to hijack your attention.
And finally, I love this one, the Mara hack, externalizing resistance.
The story goes that the Buddha was constantly pestered by a demon named Mara, who was the personification of temptation and fear. So when you feel lazy or scared or lustful, try labeling that feeling as Mara.
Oh, hello, Mara. I see you.
It sounds incredibly silly, but it works. It creates a separation. The impulse is no longer your identity. It's not, I am lazy. It's, laziness Mara is visiting me right now.
Right.
And it's much easier to politely show a salesman to the door than it is to kick yourself out of your own house.
Okay, we are heading into the final stretch here, and we have to talk about the really weird stuff. Section 7, liminal states, the transition zones of consciousness.
Right. Because from a Buddhist perspective, waking, sleeping, and dying are not separate categories. They're a continuum. If you sleep 8 hours a night, that's a third of your life.
Yeah.
If you aren't practicing while you're asleep, you're wasting a third of your potential.
And this is where dream yoga comes in. Essentially, lucid dreaming.
This is a huge practice in Tibetan Buddhism. You train yourself through daytime practices to wake up inside the dream, to realize, I am dreaming.
And then what? Do you just fly around and have fun?
You can, but that's just the beginner level. The real practice is to then test the reality of the dream. In the dream, you try to turn fire into water. You try to walk through walls. You turn the ground into the sky. You multiply yourself into 100 copies.
Why would you do that?
To prove to your deep mind, experientially, that the environment is malleable. It's mind-made. And the crucial insight you're trying to carry over is this. The waking world is just a denser, stickier, more consensus-driven dream.
And then the ultimate transition, the bardo, the state after death.
The Tibetans have a detailed manual for this, the Pardo Thodol, often called the Tibetan Book of the Dead. They map the entire physiology and psychology of the dying process.
What happens according to the map?
They describe the dissolution of the elements. First, the earth element sinks into the water element. The body feels incredibly heavy, you can't move. Then water sinks into fire. Your mouth gets dry, all the fluids in the body dry up. Then fire sinks into air. The body gets cold from the extremities inward. Finally, air sinks into consciousness. The outer breath stops.
And then, the moment of death.
Then comes the clear light of dawn. For a brief moment, the hardware of the body is dead. The software of the personal ego is gone, and you experience the pure, raw electricity of consciousness itself, the source code.
And the instruction from the manual is, catch it. Don't miss it.
Recognize it. If you have trained your whole life, you can recognize that brilliant, empty light as your own true nature. If you can do that and relax into it, you are instantly enlightened. You escape the cycle of rebirth. But if you panic, which most of us do because the ego is dissolving and it's terrifying, you fall into the subsequent bardos. You start hallucinating peaceful and then wrathful deities, which are just projections of your own mind, and eventually you get sucked into a new womb. Game over. Insert coin to play again.
That is just an incredible system. But we have to end with the warnings, because we promised no fluff, and that means acknowledging the very real risks.
Meditation is not risk-free. If you start messing with the source code of your operating system without knowing what you're doing, you can crash the computer.
We talked about the psychological terror of the dark night, but there are also physiological risks like prana sickness.
In Tibet, they call it lung disorder. If you push the visualization practices or the breath work too hard, you can literally fry your nervous system. It manifests as severe anxiety, insomnia, heart palpitations, paranoia.
And the cure isn't more meditation.
No, absolutely not. The cure is to stop meditating immediately. The traditional advice is to eat heavy foods like red meat, drink some wine, go for a walk in nature, watch a dumb movie. You need to ground yourself back into the physical world.
And then there's the most subtle trap of all, spiritual materialism.
The ego is the ultimate shapeshifter. It will wear a suit and tie and chase a promotion, or it will wear a monk's robe and chase enlightenment. If you start thinking, I am so spiritual, look at how much I meditate, I am better than these sleeping sheeple who just watch TV, the ego has won. You haven't escaped the prison. You've just decorated your prison cell with Buddhist posters.
And this is why, in the end, you need a teacher.
It's essential. You cannot perform brain surgery on yourself while looking in a mirror. You need someone outside of your own deluded system to look at you and say, hey, you aren't enlightened. You're just having a manic episode. Go eat a hamburger and get some sleep.
Okay, let's bring this all home. We've covered 2,500 years of history and practice. We've gone from the forests of ancient India to the samurai courts of Japan to the neuroscience of today. If we had to boil it all down and summarize the algorithm, what is it?
At its core, it's a process of subtraction.
First, stop acting like a jerk so your mind isn't constantly agitated by guilt and remorse.
Align the body so you can stay still without pain.
Train the attention, your mental muscle, to stay on one thing.
Use that new laser-like focus to look directly at the feeling of self.
Endure the terror of seeing that the self you thought was so solid is actually a flickering, impermanent fiction.
Stop fighting the flow. Let go of the need to control everything.
The system reboots, free from the core delusion.
It really is a systematic dismantling. We spend our entire lives building this identity, this self, defending it, polishing it. And this entire vast system is designed to prove it never existed in the first place.
The Buddha's invitation wasn't believe me. It wasn't worship me. His final and most important instruction was ihapasiko.
Come and see.
Come and see for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Don't take anyone's word for it. Run the experiment in the laboratory of your own mind and see what the data tells you.
And that leads us to our final thought, a provocation for you, the listener.
If this entire system is even remotely true, if the self that you take to be you is just a story, a construct, a bundle of habits and memories,
then who or what has been listening to this conversation for the last hour?
and what remains when the voices stop?
Something to sit with. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Keep investigating.